Bonsoir et bienvenue. Good evening, Kwe. My name is Stephanie Truant, and I am the Artistic Administrator for the National Arts Center Orchestra. Je vous souhaite la bienvenue au CNA, à nos invités en personne, et ceux qui se joignent à nous en ligne. I'd like to start by acknowledging that the NAC sits on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe. Nous rendons hommage à la nation algonquine en qui nous voyons la gardienne du passé, du présent et de l'avenir de ce territoire. I have been involved with the Songs for Murdered Sisters project since the very beginning, when Joshua Hopkins and his wife Zoe Tertius first approached us about commissioning a work to honor his sister Natalie, Carol, and Anastasia. I am deeply honored and grateful that tonight we are finally able to present the world premiere of this work. Jake Heggie's music will enrapture you, while Margaret Atwood's words will haunt and comfort you. I am also very honored to welcome these four phenomenal women to the stage: Joanne Brooks, Julie Lalonde, Faye Casista, and Lisa Ugama. Their work and advocacy for women's rights and raising awareness for the many issues around violence against women and intimate partner violence is tireless and ongoing. La conversation que nous allons entendre sera émouvante et importante. Merci d'être parmi nous ce soir. To begin the conversation, I would like to invite you to watch a short video narrated by Joshua Hopkins.
I was in late rehearsals for Barbara of Seville. I got a phone call. My sister had been murdered by her ex-boyfriend.
An intense manhunt in eastern Ontario today. Police there searching for an armed suspect wanted for allegedly killing 3 women.
Our world was immediately turned upside down after Natalie's murder. My wife and I had this germ of an idea to not only honor my sister Natalie, but also to honor all the women that have been taken from us. We really hope to be able to provide healing to audience members that have dealt with tragic loss that is extended from intimate partner violence or gender-based violence. I really hope that the universality of this song cycle speaks to so many different people in all walks of life about waking them up to this global epidemic of gender-based violence.
I think it's on. Hello, my name is Joanne Brooks, and we brought some candles with us tonight that we want to light in honor of the women, and Lisa's going to speak to anonymous women. So we light the first candle for Natalie Warmerdam.
We light the second candle for Carol Colton.
We light the third candle for Anastasia Kuzak.
I light this fourth candle for all women who are currently living in violence, as well as women who have died at the hands of violence who have not been recognized.
So I'd like to start out. So first off, thank you very much for having us here this evening to share a little bit about our domestic violence, and sad that we have to be here tonight and having this, and very touching just to see that video clip again, because every one of us could tell you exactly where we were that minute, that day that we all got that phone call. So it did turn Renfrew County upside down for sure. So my name's Faye, as we'd said, and I am the program coordinator for Victim Services of Renfrew County. I've been working there for a little over 20 years, and my role basically is working with human trafficking, sexual assault survivors, and high-risk domestics. So we do have a very eclectic group of us here that work within this violence against women. And we're just going to talk a little bit tonight about some of the statistics, look at the violences, where we're at. We're going to talk about the rural issues that we face in Renfrew County. And then Joanne's going to talk a bit about our art and some of the stuff that we can do, and then hopefully wrap up a bit about what can we do? What can we do as a community, as a society, to try to put an end to this epidemic, as we like to call it. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be here this evening, and I'll turn it over to Julie.
Bonjour. Merci tout le monde d'être ici ce soir, even though the weather is truly atrocious. So I appreciate your dedication to being here and holding space. Again, my name is Julie Lalonde, and I have been working for 20 years to end gender-based violence in Canada. I'm a survivor of intimate partner violence and stalking, and I was working in Renfrew County at the time of the triple femicides, actually researching the reality of what it means to be a woman living in a violent situation in a rural community specifically. And we will make plenty of reference to that this evening because rural women are disproportionately at risk of femicide. And the fact that these women were killed in a rural area is not a coincidence. And so we need to be doing more work in that area. And so we're grateful that urban folk are here to have that conversation with us tonight.
Hi, so my name is Lisa Ugama. My background is social work. I have been working in the field for 36 years, primarily with victims of violence. I was the founding executive director at Victim Services for almost 20 years and semi-retired, if you can say that, to lead our new anti-human trafficking response program. Very clearly remember the day and the phone call as things started to unfold on that horrible day in our history. And I'm very honored to be here with you this evening. And I bring with me not my knowledge, if I can say that, but what I have learned and been privileged to learn from all of the women that I have supported over those 36 years.
One thing I forgot to mention is that we were talking earlier today, and between the four of us, we almost have 110 years, of working with violence against women. So we just thought that was an interesting fact today. We were all sitting talking about the work we do and how long we've been doing it, and just wondered if we could have, capture how many women and children we have touched over those 109 years. So just put that out there too.
I'm Joanne Brooks, and on September 22nd, 2015, I was the executive director for many years of the Women's Sexual Assault Center, and we were just waiting for Julie Lalonde to come because we were going to do our Take Back the Night March, and Julie was our keynote speaker. I read an article that was in The Citizen, I think this week, and Lynn Saxberg referred to me as an expert in violence against women, which I thought was really interesting. It's not something that I ever aspired to do. I grew up in a house of violence. I have supported women for more than 30 years, and I have learned so much from the women that I have worked with over the years. The resilience of women, the powerfulness of women, the creativeness of women, and my colleagues. Without this feminist advocacy, especially in rural Ontario, it would be really challenging to continue to do this work. So I'm happy to be here tonight. I'm very honored that we could share in this moment with Joshua and the work that he's created. I'm going to turn it over to Julie, who's going to speak about the bigger issues of violence against women and tell you some of the statistics that we know about violence against women, gender-based violence, sometimes called intimate partner violence.
So I have dyscalculia, so I had to write down the numbers because I jumble them constantly. So it's a lot of numbers, but it's just important for us to sit with what happened that day is not an anomaly. It is happening every 2.5 days in Canada. A woman or girl is killed. In 2021, so the last year that we have a full year's report, the youngest victim was 3 weeks old. The oldest victim was 97. I talk a lot in my work about how when you are a woman in this country, your risk of violence is a womb-to-tomb situation, and I think we see that unfortunately played out all the time. It's also gotten deadlier every year of the pandemic. There were 160 femicides in 2020, there were 173 in 2021, and as of now, still going through the statistics, there were about 190 in 2022. Of the 157 accused for 2021, 140 were men. We talk about this as a gendered crime because it is, And I know it makes people more comfortable to talk about violence in general terms. Even the term violence against women, that's passive language. We're talking about men's violence against women. And the fact that when I say violence against women, I don't get backlash. But when I say I fight to end men's violence against women, I get literal death threats, tells you that the way we even talk about this conversation has not been productive, right? So I encourage you to be brave and to use active language. Who is a threat to us? It's men. Men are more likely to be killed by other men. Men are more likely to be sexually assaulted by other men. And women are disproportionately being harmed by men. And disproportionately being harmed by men who claim to love us, which is also important. So 74% of the femicides were committed by a former or current partner. Over 20% were committed by a family member. There was just a femicide in Renfrew County where a woman was murdered by her son. That is something that happens disproportionately than what most people believe. Also, that rural component, I cannot emphasize that enough, and it's not just because I come from rural Northern Ontario. 45% of the femicide cases last year were rural women, and rural people as a whole represent 16% of the Canadian population. We are disproportionately being killed in rural communities, and I'm gonna pass it to Lisa and Faye in a second to talk about why that is, because it's not an accident. And then if we look strictly at Ontario, there were 52 femicides in 52 weeks. From November 2021 to November 2022, there were 52, one a week just here in Ontario, 8 in the month of December alone. We had 2 femicides a week in the month of December. We had a provincial election. Did anybody talk about violence against women? Right? This is happening and it's not being talked about. And so I know it sounds like a cliche, but that's why we're so honored to see you here tonight, because we oftentimes do feel like we just talk amongst each other or we're speaking into a void. But it's really important to understand that what happened to those 3 women was preventable, but it's also painfully common. And that's why that candle was important for us to bring to represent the women whose lives are in imminent danger as we speak and sit here tonight. So, thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Those are staggering numbers, and we know, as Julie has shared, that the violence is happening everywhere. And tonight we were asked specifically to talk about what is different in rural Ontario. And for us, I'm going to speak to rural Renfrew County. It's a huge geographic area with a low population density. And part of that, people love because you want to, vacation or move to or have a cottage in an area where there's pristine lakes and there's trails to hike and there's beautiful roads to travel and parks to camp in and all of those kinds of things. And it is beautiful. Born and raised, spent most of my life in Renfrew County, and I love it. But part of what happens in those communities is that sense of the culture, the norms and the values, the traditions, the gender roles that are perpetuated because it is a rural county. We have the reality of male-led families. We have the reality of the gender expectations of what you can and cannot do. We have the reality of what's okay in the hockey locker room, in Renfrew County that may not be acceptable, here. And I know that everything that we're about to share can also be here. We just see it in a higher, at higher rates in Renfrew County. The whole tolerance and acceptance of violence in general, and the attitude that what happens in your home is your private business prevents neighbors oftentimes from intervening. It prevents communities from really looking at the issue. So there's that whole culture that has its, the geography that has its good points, but the culture in that makes it warm and welcoming to everyone else is not warm and welcoming necessarily to those who live there. We have the issue of privacy and anonymity and confidentiality. It doesn't exist. I can walk down the street in Ottawa and nobody knows me if I live here, right? My sister lives here. She can walk anywhere and people really don't know her. But for us in Renfrew County, you are known by the 18th generation behind you. That's how people connect all the dots. So you can't get away with anything, oftentimes, if you're a woman. mostly. But if you are not known, if you are new to the area and you move into the area, you're known as that new person, so you stand out anyways. So you can't hide, because whatever you do is going to get back to your partner. And people may innocently say, oh, I saw your wife's car or your daughter's car at such and such, and she wasn't supposed to be there. So that gets sent back, and that may be the result for her in a beating. So there is no privacy, there is no anonymity. You may go for help, for example, to one of the services, and the person who's answering the phone or working the front desk is a family member of the person who's abusing you. And they may be supportive, but nonetheless, you have that fear that somehow he's going to coerce you into coerce the helper into giving up the victim because of the pressures that he puts on, because the victim knows those tactics. She has lived with them every day. She knows how they work. So even when you do try to seek help, you're taking a huge risk for your own safety. And we often tell people, as a community, well, just get out, right? Just get out. But when we look at getting out, there's the issue of where do you go, right? And first off, who are we to tell people just to get out? We don't know their reality. We know that women will often say, I know what he's doing if I'm still in the house with him. I can predict better than, because I don't know what's happening when I leave him. Right? So if you do, make the choice and you're able to put everything together and you leave, where do you go? And I know thanks to COVID, everyone is talking about the housing crisis and the lack of affordable housing and the lack of safe housing. We've been dealing with that in Renfrew County for as long as I can remember. There is not a lot of affordable housing. There is not geared to income housing that truly meets the needs of the wait list that it's on. We have women for I'm going to say 2 years, perhaps, at least, waiting on apartments to be able to leave. We also have to look at the resources. We have some awesome resources in our county of agencies that help, but we're very limited. We're very limited by the number of staff we have. We're limited by the resources that we can actually give back to a woman to help her get out. Our food banks right now, which everywhere we know the cost of food, people are struggling because our food banks also don't have very much. So, we were having a conversation and, one person recently was given 3 potatoes, 6 eggs, and 1 bag of milk and a jar of Cheese Whiz. Thank you. And that was it. That was to get them through for the next, till the rest of the end of the month. Nobody can live on that, and it's not even a real meal. Women are constantly telling us that they are starving themselves. They haven't eaten for 3 or 4 days. When we get the call to say, can you help at all? Because they're choosing not to eat to allow their children to actually have something to eat. So there's the whole context of that. There's the reality and the cultural acceptance of the guns in Renfrew County. And the reality is people have guns for hunting and people have guns for their farm, right? To protect from, animals that are going to hurt their livestock, for example. Those can be very legitimate reasons, but we also know the presence of guns significantly increases a woman's risk of lethality in the situation of domestic violence. We also know that guns are used as threats if you don't behave, meanwhile they're cleaning their guns in the process of that conversation. So I'm not here to say anything political about guns, but the increased presence, the reality of rural living is almost every house in the county has a gun. And so we look at that with respect to risks. The other reality that we have is there's absolutely no public transportation. So I know yesterday, the day before, the government just re-announced money, and part of that was transportation. That does not help us in rural Renfrew County. We have not had public buses for years, and the only location that did have it was one city in our entire county, and that's been long gone. So we have to rely on neighbors or friends to help us. And if you live, an hour away from a community and you need to get in for groceries, you have to be able to trust that your neighbor is somebody that you can trust, because when you're going for groceries, you may actually be trying to reach out and speak to a counselor. So the whole lack of transportation. And we, through our agency and one of the programs that we offer, can give out taxi chits, for example, to assist a woman in getting to some of those appointments safely. But they come back and say, there's, not every taxi service can be trusted. And so that also reduces their ability to seek help. So there's a number of realities that women face in our area that prevent that. We have no second stage housing. So if a woman does go into our shelter, there's nowhere for her to go but on the waiting list for our geared to income housing. There's no other option for her. We also, in the county, have an extremely high rate of addictions and substance abuse. I remember years ago now, so this is an outdated study, but Renfrew County had the highest rate of addictions in the province of Ontario. I can't imagine our numbers have dropped very much, but I cannot also, ethically quote that we still hold that status. So when you look at that, and alcohol and substances are not an excuse, but they're a disinhibitor for behavior, right? So we know that that also places women at increased risk. We also know that if women use substances to survive the violence, that is held against them when they're trying to access certain services. So those are some not good news. I could go on, and I do know we are time limited on that, but I wanted to bring out some of the highlights of it that really make it increasingly unsafe in rural areas just to live, and increasingly more challenging because there's more barriers when they're actually trying to access help and to, leave the violence. So that is not necessarily good news, and it can be overwhelming and very upsetting. And so one of the things we want to do is to talk about what are some of the positive ways that we can channel that energy for change and that pain that we feel, and to try in small ways and in big ways to make changes for survivors and victims of violence. I'll pass that on.
Thank you. One of the quotes that Carrie Fisher said once upon a time was, "Take your broken heart and make art." We have an organization within Renfrew County called EVA, which is End Violence Against Women, and many service providers like Victim Services, like the Women's Sexual Assault Center, individual people, the Health Unit, Justice Partners, they are members of that table. And now, in my new, older, gray-haired hat, I am the coordinator of the EVA table. I just want to back up for a moment and say that after Natalie and Carol and Anastasia were murdered, an inquest was called. And it was delayed because of the pandemic and many delays. So EVA itself wanted standing at the inquest. We came across a fabulous lawyer, Kirsten Mercer, who you may have heard of. She represented EVA at the inquest, which happened this past June. And also Pamela Cross, another expert in this work of violence against women, is a real friend and ally of Renfrew County and did a lot of meetings with folks before the inquest happened so that she could share what she learned from Renfrew County residents at the inquest. Kirsten is a wise, wise woman, and she said, if we're going to do the inquest, perhaps we need to take our broken hearts and make art. And EVA itself had, and you saw that where Josh was, and that's the Women's Monument that's in Petawawa, and that was created, I think, in 2013, more than 10 years ago. And it is a place that we honor women on December 6th. Sometimes we go there whenever women are murdered in our county or there's a significant violence against women episode that we want to honor and remember. And we got thinking, we have a very, Renfrew County has few resources in many ways, but we are very rich in our people. And we are all connected. And I can call anybody on the EVA table and things will happen. Just everyone's connected, and that's a beautiful thing, in my opinion. We have a lovely connection with Redefine Arts. If you ever have an opportunity to check out their Facebook page, their website. Anna Camilleri in Toronto is the lead artist of Redefine Arts. The Women's Sexual Assault Center created the first sexual violence monument in North America, Stone Pebble Monument, that was community collaboration and created by members of the community. So we got talking with Anna, and then we got grant writing, because we said, we need to create art. We can't do this inquest. We have broken hearts. All of us have broken hearts. Renfrew County is still a tingle with the effects of what happened. And so we talked to Anna. She came and worked for the summer. And no, sorry, that happened after the summer. Sorry, that happened while the inquest was going on. And members of the community were invited to come dream the dream of what a monument, a Stone Pebble monument would look like. And it was built by the community, and it now exists in Barry's Bay, which is one of the communities in Renfrew County. And it was unveiled on September 22nd, 2022, which was the 7th anniversary of the murders of Anastasia and Carol and Natalie. I think, just in speaking with people, it's been a powerful emblem of how we can come together, how we can talk about what happened, how we can talk about how we can make change in our world around violence against women. And it's a powerful piece. If you happen to come to Renfrew County, please come to Petawawa, the Emerald Trail in Petawawa for the Women's Monument. It's a very powerful place, as is the monument in Barry's Bay. And I think it's important when we have broken hearts to make art. And I'm so honored to be part of this evening because Josh has done just that. And here is another facet of how we can live through the horror of violence against women. So I'm going to turn it over to Julie, who's going to talk a little bit about what we can do.
Yeah, so one, if you do go to Petawawa and see the monument, it is particularly haunting because the monument was created about 10 years ago, as Joanne said, and it features 3 wrought iron shapes of women. So to then go back, because 3 women were murdered in the same day, it's heavy, but it's powerful, it's by the water, it's a very beautiful space, and I really do encourage folks to take up Joanne on that, to go and see it. But one of the beautiful things of being from a rural area, which all of us are, is we are very much get-to-business kind of people. We don't have time for frou-frou fancy stuff. Let's get into the weeds of figuring this thing out. So we wanted to really end with some concrete things that folks can do, because being in community is really important, but we got to take that energy and put it somewhere. And I can say, as a public educator who teaches thousands of people every year on how to prevent gender-based violence, when we just give people statistics, they start glazing over. It feels too big of a problem to solve. It's overwhelming, it's depressing, and it's harmful for survivors. But when we give people concrete ways out of the problem, then people feel energized and they can find the hope in that. Because by definition, being a feminist means you are optimistic because you believe the world can change. So we have an incentive to make that happen. So there's 2 things that I want to encourage folks. One is money, 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 and not just, petitioning the government to fund it, although that's absolutely part of it, and not just fighting for things like United Way, although that's also important, but fundamentally trust that the people on the front lines know what to do with your money. Make donations directly to the agencies that you are trying to work with. Let's start cutting out a lot of the bureaucracy, right? These are charitable organizations that will gladly put your money to good use. And so I encourage you to make monthly donations or one donation directly to agencies of your choice. But obviously my bias is towards the rural communities where there's no big black tie galas in Renfrew County to raise money for the shelter.
We don't own black ties.
They don't own black ties.
No, we don't.
Even Joanne was like, I gotta find fancy pants.
She told me I had to bouge it up. Bouge it up.
I'm like, it's the NEC, you gotta be bougie. So we would love to have a black tie gala in Renfrew County, and if anyone wants to help us put it together, please do. But until that happens, put money directly in the hands of the people doing the work, whether it's violence against women, anti-racism work, like Fundamentally, it tells me that you trust that they actually are the experts. So no more patronizing, kind of overarching, like put it in our hands. And secondly, one of the most frustrating parts about my work is I speak, like I said, I train thousands and thousands of people every year, and almost 100% of the time, someone in the audience will say, I have daughters, Julie, what do I do? And I never hear somebody say, I have a son. If you have a son, if you have a nephew, if you're a teacher, if you've got grandkids, like, why are we not having that conversation? Because these are men that were boys, right, that were loved, and then chose a life of harm against women. So let's really think about the conversations that we're having with young men and the conversations we're not having with young men. Because I'm here to tell you, when you're not having that conversation, Andrew Tate is, Jordan Peterson is, random losers on the internet are, right? When we look at some of the most intense mass murders we've had in this country, they were all motivated by misogyny. A man in his 20s was mad that a woman rejected him, so he drove a van through the streets of Toronto. Like, these are things that have happened in the last few years alone, and all we want to say is, what do I tell my daughters? And I'm like, tell your daughter to live her best life. Tell your son to respect women. Like, it's that simple. So that's my sort of homework for you folks, is if you have any kind of influence over a young man, please have a frank conversation with them about what their own values are about women, whether they date women or not, but also, are they complicit in the behavior of others? Somebody helped that man find a gun that day, and that's how he was able to murder women. Somebody told my stalker where I lived so he could find me, right? Men are not only committing the violence, they're often complicit, right? Look at Hockey Canada. Look at St. Michael's in Toronto. Look at these cases where there were maybe a handful of young men that were engaging in the violence, but there were 3 times as many who were looking away, who were laughing, or who were just closing their eyes, right? So please, please, please take that to heart, because that's what the community needs, is to start early and often with these conversations. Thank you.
So I think that we are at the part of Q&A, questions that you may have for us or comments that you want to make before we break in about 15 minutes to head into the well-anticipated concert.
Oh, we do have an online question, actually, to start us off.
The question from Susan was, how do I approach someone? Like, what are the steps if I feel like someone is being abused? Like, how do I open that discussion with them? Or is that the best starting point?
It's a very simple phrase to remember, is I see, I feel. So oftentimes when we try to broach the conversation with someone, and I can speak from experience, people come at it from a place of judgment of like, why do you let him talk to you like that? I thought you were stronger than this, da-da-da-da-da. I see, I feel. So you're starting from your position of, I see that your personality has changed since you've started dating this person. I see that the light is out in your eyes. And I feel concerned for you. I'm sad for you. I miss you, right? And what you're doing is you're being honest about your own perspective without forcing the person or shaming the person into doing the right thing, and instead saying, when you're ready, I'm here because I'm noticing, and therefore you've made it known that when that person is ready, they know exactly who they can go to, because you've made it known that you're not judging them for being in that situation. You're concerned. But oftentimes our concern comes out as anger or condescension. So I see, I feel, je vois, je ressens. If you can remember that, really for any kind of situation, whether it's a mental health crisis, substance misuse, intimate partner violence, it's a way to open a door that really is opening a door instead of coming at it with judgment. Because when you're judgy, that's when people get defensive. And that's when they start denying. But if you've made it clear that I'm not here to be upset with you, I'm concerned, that makes a world of difference.
And I think, too, it makes you a safe person so that the conversation can continue. And if resources are wanted, then that's something that can be shared. But you become safe. And oftentimes, the first contact is just the tip of the iceberg. So, yeah.
And I think I would add that no matter what they say, believe them. right? Because they are finding the courage to share with you what is happening with them, and it can be overwhelming. And oftentimes the abuser presents as somebody who, you know, is nice to everybody else. So people have a hard time wrapping their head around the behaviors that you're describing. So believe.
Lisa, is there another question? Sorry. Okay.
It's hard to see folks with the light, sorry.
Sorry.
Thank you all for a very powerful presentation. I'm curious about the inquest this summer. Was the outcome positive did it have a positive impact on the community and on the issue of violence against women?
That's a great question. And I think it might be really great if each of us just take a moment to talk about what's the thing that was hopeful for you about the inquest. There were 86 recommendations. So, Lisa, do you want to wade into that at all?
Sure. I think that the recommendations that were made were very thoughtful. The jurors put a lot of work into the recommendations, and I think that really they are doable. I think to answer directly, what impact does it has? We're still waiting. We're still waiting. Tomorrow, we're hoping in the news, because it's 6 months, and that's sort of the magic time when the government is to make some sort of an announcement about acknowledging receipt and what they may or may not be doing. So we really are hoping for good news in that area. I think that one of the big things is our sister county, Lanark County, has actually had their municipality proclaim femicide as an epidemic. And that's a huge step, and we're all working towards making that happen across the province. So out of the recommendations from the jury, that is one of my big hopes, is that does happen, because sadly, it kind of gives it credibility then. It's not just happening in a private home. It's saying this is happening everywhere, and we need to take the death of somebody seriously. So my hope is that one will actually happen. I also hope that one of the other recommendations was around creating some sort of a body to ensure that recommendations are reviewed by all the different parties that they were directed to, in the hopes of holding them accountable to make sure that they happen. So I would hope that piece would happen as well, because then everything else is going to flow, right? So there's others that I could personally speak to, but I will share the mics with others, because my hope is that one will make everything else happen.
And I guess from my perspective, I was at the inquest and I sat there every single day. I never missed a day of it. It was very tough, probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my career. I had to testify as well, and I found that very challenging, as well as, I'm not even sure what the words was, but anyway, it was very enlightening. And I think my biggest hope of this inquest is that we see some change. I don't want to go through all we did, go relive that, bring it back to Renfrew County, bring it to the forefront for nothing to change. And I do believe some of the people that were there, that was overseeing it and running it, and Prabhu and a few of the higher ups that were actually running it, they were impacted as well. Like it made a change, I think, for a lot of people there. So my hope is that something does come out of it. It's not just going to sit somewhere, as we always say, another inquest on the desk somewhere in Toronto. I really hope that something comes out, and it looks like our county is looking at declaring the epidemic, and we're staying right on them. We're not letting up at all. So we know the warden pretty good, so that's where we're sort of staying on top of that and not letting up. And I think that's the important piece, is not to let this fizzle out. We're going to stay on top of it, and hopefully, some change will come, and women then can stop dying in Renfrew County and around, all over. So that's my hope.
I just want to jump in for a quick second, Faye, not to out you, but we had a conversation not that long ago, and Faye said to me that she's just working real hard to keep women's names off the rock in Petawawa. That's what you do every day. And that's a hard job, and I just want to acknowledge that, Faye. You do so much good work. Thank you.
To honor, I mean, yes, let's applaud Faye all day, every day. That rhymes. But to honor the work of Faye and Lisa and Joanne is to hold the government accountable. That is a thing that you can do. Tomorrow is the 6-month mark. If Dougie Doug has no updates, we're going to ask Dougie Doug what he's been up to for the last 6 months. That's a thing we can all do. You have an MPP, you have an ability to contact them. It will sit on a shelf and collect dust if we do not make noise, so that's important. And in terms of the inquest, what I would say personally is it was the first time I had gone to court since my own experience of going to court where I was not believed by the legal system. And so I was terrified to testify, but it was unbelievably different. And that to me is the hope of the inquest, and it's actually why Pamela Cross has been crisscrossing across, mon Dieu, I'm making all kinds of poems up here tonight. Pamela Cross is crisscrossing across Ontario to show people that you can have a community-based inquest that follows all of the legal protocols and is still compassionate and kind and not adversarial. We were cross-examined, we were asked questions, there was a jury, we had to swear. Like, it was a legitimate legal process that saw the humanity in every single person that went up there and testified. And that tells me that what I went through and what countless women go through in the legal system is a choice, and we can choose differently. And to have a rural community create a model that can be replicated elsewhere, that alone is a gift that the inquest has given us. But in order for it not to sit on a shelf, we all have to commit to getting loud about it, for sure, yeah.
Thanks. I think within the feminist movement, the activists, I know at the beginning of the inquest process, many folks were asking us, how can you be hopeful about this? We've had inquests before, but there hasn't been one for 20 years. I want to say that one of the things that touched my heart a great deal was that there were 5 Renfrew County residents who were on the jury, and they later on told us that they really didn't know a lot about violence against women, that they learned so much. And they were presented, I think, with 73, something like that, things for them to consider in terms of recommendations by the coroner's office and by Eva's legal team and that. And they came back with 86 recommendations, which meant that they came up with at least 13 of their own. And the first one was that we need to declare intimate partner violence, femicide, an epidemic. That has never been said before. And I know collectively in the room that day when they started reading recommendations, our breath got sucked out. Can you imagine that after doing this work for so long, knowing so many women who have died, have been affected by violence, that you want to call this really what it is? You want to name the truth? This is an epidemic. I often say, I know OPP officers sign up to be OPP officers. They carry weapons, and it's a terrible tragedy when they are murdered in the line of work. But can you imagine if an OPP officer was killed at the rate that women are killed in this province, 1 per week? I'm going to say Dougie Doug would be doing something about that. So if we keep making noise and the feminists are making noise, please come with us and make noise, because that's how change will happen. And I don't want to die without some more change. So join us in, and I think that we're running out of time. Does anybody want to say anything else?
Just again, merci beaucoup to be here and hold space. Thank you.
Thank you.
Because I'm a Leo, I do have one more thing to say, which is all of this conversation can stir up many things, because maybe it's your experience, maybe it's your partner's experience, maybe it's your sister's experience. Please find a place that you can reach out to speak. Don't keep that if you don't want to. It's important to reach out. Thanks for coming.